Howdy, howdy, and welcome to episode 83 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. Here on this episode of Eyes Free Sports, our guest is a gentleman in the Washington, D.C. area who is a longtime adaptive athlete in numerous sports for the blind and visually impaired, and he also competed in a number of sports in his childhood with fully sighted teammates and in many mainstream sports as well. So let's hit the field now for episode 83. All right, so my guest here on this episode of the podcast is Kevin Brown, and Kevin is a highly accomplished, highly experienced, multi-sport adaptive athlete. Kevin, welcome to Eyes Free Sports.
Great, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being on your show.
Absolutely. Definitely excited about this just because I know you've been involved in so many different sports and have such a fascinating background. So really appreciate you taking the time here. So first off, Kevin, let's just kind of kick things off here with just your early years. Talk to me about where you were born and kind of your formative years growing up.
Yeah, I was born in El Centro, California, which is the middle of the desert. And my dad was in the military. And so I grew up traveling, in the military lifestyle early on with my brother and my older brother by 3 years and my younger sister by 2. And so we had a pretty, good family unit. We grew up in the 70s. And as we traveled around the country, from a military perspective, my mom was in nursing. So, a dual parent working family. And so we grew up, participating in a lot of outside activities as kids. This was all pre-electronics and video games and things of that nature. So our electronics were getting outside and playing in the backyard, running around, playing tag. And so I was really fortunate to have a really cohesive family unit that was engaged in each other. And so from an activity perspective, we couldn't wait to do things outside. In the 70s, in the winter times, I lived in Ohio near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and, it would get really cold. And, my dad would do creative things and shovel the backyard and hose it down in the wintertime, create ice rinks and things like that. So, early on we'd get out there and, even if it was, 5 degrees below zero, we were still out there, before the school bus came by, running around in our boots or putting on a pair of skates to just, have fun. And so we really, my parents cultivated an environment that just had you participate in as many activities as you possibly could and, just do life. And so that was just really kind of an exciting time to, be a kid, because I always felt like, we had this environment where we were able to do as much as we wanted to do in terms of just being active, camping, fishing. And we did these activities with some families and friends. And it was just kind of a really cool way to grow up and learn about life and society. So like I said, very cool to have a family unit that was so tight in everything that we did.
Right. That's awesome. And I'm always curious with military brats, did you find that challenging at all, that lifestyle, picking up and moving every so often?
We kind of had a unique experience with our military scenario. My dad is multiple engineers and multiple engineering degrees. And so, he worked on a lot of interesting projects over time. But when we moved finally from Ohio to the DC area, Northern Virginia, my dad worked over at the Pentagon. And while we were there, that's about the time they started, really noticing some significant challenges with my vision. And the school district I lived in, which was Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, had a very good program to deal with folks who had, some special needs or, as it relates to, for me, low vision. So I was always mainstreamed. But when we lived in DC, the DC area, we were able to kind of continue to stay located here. And so we didn't have to move that much in later years because my dad was able to communicate the advantages that were provided by the county and the school system to facilitate me continuing to be mainstreamed, as well as my sister. And so that was one of the ways in terms of, we didn't have that typical military travel experience like others after about the age of 8 for myself. And kind of how we found out about my vision loss was why we were here. My sister started exhibiting signs that she started to have some challenges with vision. And, by that point in time, 70 years old, I was already legally blind, but no one, we didn't know anything of what was causing anything along the lines of, what the condition was. I just had some Coke bottle glasses, and that seemed to suffice, other than the fact that I couldn't read the chalkboard. But I was such an athletic kid and wanted to keep up with my older brother and do everything that he did, that I was somebody who would practice and participate. Long after he stopped practicing, I would be out there to be able to compete with kids 3 years older than me, because I didn't want to miss out. I wanted to be just like him. He was a pretty good role model, at least at that age.
Sure. Right. It's all relative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So then, kind of on the vision perspective, so, the school system that I went to here in Fairfax County, they had a tremendous low vision program. They actually called it the LOVE program. And that program, I had a counselor or specialist that really believed that, if we can accommodate the resources in the mainstream school system, let's do that. Let's, continue to work with his peers and friends, and let's not take him out of that environment and put him in for a school for the deaf and the blind. So I didn't even realize that was, a consideration. And so for me, I just grew up just being the kid who saw a little bit less than everybody else. And that, the younger age of, 8, 9, 10 years old, that difference wasn't as profound in terms of what it meant in terms of, no one was driving at that time at that age. So,
sure.
I was pretty, fortunate from that perspective. But from a vision perspective, I do have a degenerative eye condition that was originally diagnosed as Stargardt's, and then much later in life was determined to be cone rod dystrophy.
Oh, I see. And I know you mentioned your sister is visually impaired as well.
Correct. Yeah, she's got the same condition, cone rod dystrophy. Her vision hasn't progressed nearly as fast. It had early signs, and then it's been hovering around that 2400 to 2600 level for those folks who are familiar with that.
Gotcha. And I'm curious, any other relatives, anyone historically in your family?
Yeah, no one in the family has any vision issues anywhere up and down the line in either direction. So it's just a unique unicorn in our family.
Right. Just shows you never know. So as far as a little more on education, so I know you mentioned you were mainstreamed K through 12.
Yeah.
And then you did go to the University of Virginia, correct?
Yeah. So, I was someone who was, like I said, highly competitive in every aspect of life. And so education wise, my parents were strong supporters of education. And so they would encourage that, aspect of their kids' lives as a priority. So they were always involved in our school projects, helping out with the school and the community. And so education was something that was bred into my mindset as this is the key aspect of what I need to be doing in life, because it's a stepping stone for everything that I hope to do in the future. So once again, great parental support structure to help, lead me in that positive directions. And so in high school, I was heavily engaged in sports and that, and as well as academics, did well in classes, performed well on various tests and things of that nature. And so when the opportunity to go to the University of Virginia, one of the primary drivers of me attending that school was not anything other than the educational opportunity. I had opportunities to play sports in other colleges and things like that. I got a couple offers to participate in different sports, but the primary interest for me was this lady at the Learning Needs and Evaluation Center at University of Virginia. And I remember visiting the school in early as I'm making my determination which college I wanted to go there. And she sat me down and said, Kevin, whatever you need, I'm going to make sure is there for you 100% of the time. And she worked in this little old building at UVA called Brooks Hall at the time, which I'm sure is not anywhere close to ADA compliant. It looked like you had to be a hobbit to work in there. It was the ceilings, the rooms were like 5'6" door entryways. So it was a really interesting building. But that location, she told me, we will make everything available to you. All your books will be read for you. And so, my recording devices were tapes for our readers. Those are, those are electronic means of recording devices. So I'm old enough now that, so my classroom environment. So she guaranteed that, hey, if you come here, I will make sure that this is the most successful environment for learning that you will be able to accomplish and your goals. And so that's, I walked out of there going, this is where I want to go. I knew it was that one lady who gave me so much confidence in terms of, as you step into a new environment, like, how am I going to be successful? How am I going to manage, being visually impaired in a college community? And there's a lot of changes and things of that nature at this time. I was, obviously nervous, and she just took all that away and built that confidence. And so that support structure is why I went there. And then that was a fabulous support structure while I was there. I just knew I had, a team on my back to help me ensure that I would be successful navigating the college experience.
Wow, that's amazing. Just one person, how much influence they can have. And obviously a lot of people don't have that individual that steps up and says, hey, I'm going to advocate for you. I'm going to do whatever it takes. So very interesting.
Yeah, it was a very powerful experience. And then, to have a conversation in an hour and walk away going, you know what, this is where I want to be. And then knowing that we're entrusted to that environment for the next 4 years. Right.
Absolutely. And so a little more on sports. So I know growing up, kind of before college, you did multiple sports, right?
Yeah, I played. My biggest love was soccer. I played it in the morning, evening, night. It was, a game of love for me. And sure. I played a little bit of baseball, for a year or two in Ohio, was little league, things of that nature. Had a little bit more challenge, obviously picking up the baseball, but still like to play in the yard, things of that nature. We played all kinds of neighborhood games growing up, from, stickball to, broom hockey to kick the can to, anything outside. We were out there from, morning till night, all summer long. And so we picked up every possible sport you could imagine. I played competitively in basketball, travel soccer, and I did some track and field running and things of that nature. And, in the high school years and things like that, but everything was, I used the winter sports to keep me in shape for soccer. Love playing basketball, love running and jumping. Did a little bit, did a lot of the different field events, including pole vault, which had its own unique experiences as a visually impaired person trying to find that box to drop the pole. But, I did everything you can imagine from a sporting perspective. But one sport I wasn't, my parents weren't excited about me participating in was football. My mom, the nursing business and at the hospital, saw a lot of, concussions and injuries and things of that nature. And so she wasn't keen on that. Plus my dad had played football and so the thought was, maybe we don't want to head down that path. Although lo and behold, they didn't know every Friday we were playing football without pads on in a much less safe environment. So I think they found out about that in a similar podcast. What did you do?
Right. Interesting. Yep. And from what I understand, your teammates, your coaches, growing up, were pretty supportive of you in spite of your vision impairment, right?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have coaches that built that trust and partnership, and which I think is critical for any successful team environment. I was blessed with really good coaches, and I had one or two that made me realize that if I'm ever involved in that process, I don't want to be anything like him or her. So, once again, I had those folks that were able to motivate and inspire me to push forward. But once again, I had that, drive that was provided from my parents to just not be afraid to fail, be afraid not to try. And so I would, once again, trying to keep up with my older brother, I would practice beyond that of called a normal person, maybe a little bit of OCD as it related to practice.
Right. Definitely a gym rat.
Yeah.
So just, yeah, kind of fast forwarding then to college. So I know you had the opportunity to actually walk on the Virginia football team, right?
Yeah, once again, I figured now I'm in college. At that point in time, uh, was emancipated from my parents, a business decision, if you will. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to play football. And so it was one of my bucket lists that I wanted to scratch. And, it was my sophomore year. I decided that, I was going to, try and be a kicker. Once again, I had pretty strong leg from playing soccer all those years. And so I decided I want to go and walk on and try and be a kicker for UVA. And so, went through the process in the spring semester, was successful, found an opportunity to be on the team, but to realize that those guys are getting bigger, faster, stronger. And so it was a mutual understanding to realize that, maybe this isn't the right time for me to be playing the game, but I did scratch the itch and demonstrated that I could make the team. And it was just a great opportunity to demonstrate to myself that, if you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. And that was one of the things that, I thought it would be really cool to be able to say, hey, I played a little bit of football in college.
Oh yeah. Especially at the Division I level. I mean, to be able to, just anyone with a disability to get the chance to compete in Division I athletics, I just find fascinating. So, hey, congrats on that.
I never got to play in the game like that young man, I think it's out of USC. So I never played in a game other than some practices and things of that nature, but felt pretty damn good.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yep. And yeah, definitely shout out to Jake Olson, if you might be listening, who did play, like you mentioned, at USC a few years ago as a long snapper. And just, again, really, really fascinating story.
Yeah, that would have been a great pairing. He could have been the long snapper and I could have been the kicker. It would have worked out well. Just need to find a placeholder in the middle.
That's right. Oh, yeah, have all three. That's, yep. So then as far as adaptive sports, so I believe, was it the USABA, the United States Association of Blind Athletes, your kind of your first foray into adaptive sports?
Yeah, so for me, adaptive sports, once again, I grew up in mainstream, so I didn't know any blind or visually impaired people my entire life. And so my introduction to USABA was, I think, probably just through researching assistive technology tools and things of that nature, and came across USABA at some point in time. But that wasn't until the really late 90s. And so, my introduction to blind sports was, very late in the game. And so, I didn't know what to expect. I remember looking at the site and saying, they had, at the time, track and field predominantly. And I just learned a little bit about the Paralympics because that wasn't something I ever really focused on. When I competed, my goal was to be in the Olympics. My track and field days and things of that nature. I mean, I was much faster when I was in my early 20s than in my later 20s when I learned about adaptive sports. And, my goal was to make it at the Olympic level for things like track or soccer, things that was my goals and interest, and my level of athleticism was, not too far from that level. So when adaptive sports came into the picture, called 1999-ish, that's really my first introduction. And so I found that there's some local events, the Northeast Games, it's part of the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Athletes and some of the other blind adaptive sports programs in the area. I started to get involved with, and it kind of in a twofold approach. One, hey, this is, get engaged in the community, learn more about some of the community as well as the assistive technology world. Obviously, I'm trending with a downward spiral with my vision level. So, how do people manage, their own challenges, and what tools do they use to maximize their efficiency or success in life? And so, building that community of support. And so when I was there, I was interested in, competing, but more so in terms of maybe I can help give back by coaching and sharing my love and passion of the games, whether it's, track and field or soccer, although there wasn't blind soccer yet. But right. we started to work on those other different activities and things like that. And, I, goal ball wasn't for me, but I met a bunch of people that, like-minded who wanted to stay competitive in life and engaged. And so that's where, my introduction was in the late 90s. And then I started, becoming more engaged in that process. And from a track and field perspective, they had, track meets for the Northeast Games. And, I remember going out pretty much cold and grabbing a lot of hardware. And then I realized like, this isn't fair. So, once again, I was used to competing against at the highest level. And, for a lot of the folks with adaptive sports, they may not have had some of that same level of coaching levels at that point in time. So thankfully that process has changed a lot, and you got a lot of great track and field athletes out there, as well as other adaptive sports athletes. So that was my introduction, and it just opened a whole new world for me. And that also kind of aligned with when my vision has this process where I go through periods of plateaus and then steep declines, which is atypical of the disease, but that was my norm. So, every, 5 to 10 years, I'd go from, one level of vision and, overnight over the course of, a week or 2 or 3, that there'd be this significant change and I'd have to kind of readapt. So I think that's kind of how I got introduced to the blind sports world or adaptive sports world. And, haven't looked back since. So call that, 1999 to 20. It's been a good 20, quarter century that I've been involved in adaptive sports.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And I can definitely relate to you in some cases, just, kind of being introduced to the whole blindness community, mid to late 20s, and, adaptive sports as well. And I'm curious, do you kind of look back and maybe wish you would have gotten more involved, as say a teenager, or any earlier than you did?
Well, certainly would have liked to have known about it earlier. I think I would have had a better chance for success in some of my track and field activities back in the day when I was a little bit younger and faster. But the reality is, for me, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to adaptive sports in a different way. Through soccer, you have things like Top Soccer, which are programs designed to soccer is for everyone concept. So they work with folks in the community that may have special needs and this, that, and the other. So I had worked with the Special Olympic program for soccer back when I was in high school. And that was one of the most rewarding activities I've ever participated in. I worked with a bunch of, folks with special needs. And every time I left practice, I left more fulfilled than I started. And I felt like, as much as I might have been helping them in the process or in the game, they taught me more about, appreciating life. And so it was one of those things that compelled me to be like, this is something that is a passion for me, is giving back. And when you're giving back, you actually get more. And so that was something I learned very early on. And so as I became more involved in that adaptive sport process, it wasn't just because it was adaptive sports, it was the opportunity to give back that was, so rewarding. So when I started once again doing the assisting with the Northeast Games and some of the, the players and athletes, working with them and developing their skills and sharing those conversations, we both gained in that process.
Sure. Interesting perspective. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit here. So let's talk some blind hockey. So as you definitely know, and maybe others out there, blind hockey's been around in Canada for a good 50 years now, but still relatively new here in the US, probably in the last decade or so. And I'm really curious how you kind of found out about blind hockey and got involved.
Well, this is one of those periods where I was dealing with those, plateaus followed by steep declines in vision. And so it was roughly 6 years ago that my vision was deteriorating again. And so at that point in time, I was, going from a B2 athlete from a vision perspective, a classification perspective, to a B1 classification, which is light perception or total blindness. And so while I was going through that transition, there happened to be something on the USABA, website that said there was a blind hockey trade event in the Washington, D.C. area, ironically 4 miles from my house. and it's the only one in the country at the time. And so how do you not go? And my wife's very supportive and very encouraging. And here I am, trying to figure out how am I going to manage this change in my life to where the level of vision has deteriorated? How am I going to be successful? So I had, all those grief related concerns and trying to make sure, like, how am I going to manage this next phase with my family and, relationships and activities and sports and coaching. And they're like, Kevin, it's right here. You have to go. So I went, and I was nervous. And normally I don't get nervous in athletic situations, but I was pretty intimidated because it wasn't something, I grew up playing. Obviously I talked about ice skating a little bit as a kid early on, but that's where it stopped. And, we didn't have ice rink skating rinks in our backyards in the DC area. We didn't get the snow. So,
sure.
So once again, knew how to skate a little bit, but not hockey skating. And so that first triad event, I was just so positively surrounded by people like, this is a great sport. You're going to have fun. Don't worry. We've got your back. And so I was out there, and one of the volunteers stopped me, like, are you okay? And I had just tears streaming down my face because I was just so excited that there was another opportunity. I'm like, no, these are tears of joy. I'm just excited to be able to, one door closes, another door opens. And that's kind of what that mindset was. And I said, okay, Kevin, you're skating pretty well. You seem to be able to, know what you're doing with the puck a little bit. If you like, come back tomorrow and you can, get you geared up and you can join us for practice. And I'm like, okay. So that next morning I got there and they're like, hey, here's all your gear. So they worked with Leveling the Playing Field, a nonprofit that provides sporting equipment. And so they literally geared me out with all this youth sports equipment and, put a pair of skates on me. And Matt Morrow, who was the head of the International Blind Hockey, I guess at the time, said, Kevin, do you trust me? I go, I trust you. He's like, I'm going to tell you to go and I'll tell you when to stop. I'm like, you'll tell me when to stop? I'm like, yeah. So I go like a bat out of hell, skating as fast as I can, and he screams, stop. And I stopped, hockey stopped about 2-3 feet from the board. And he's like, oh, thank God. He's like, you got a lot of trust. I'm like, well, you told me. So, So I felt pretty safe. Probably wasn't in that particular situation. And so I remember going, this seems like it could be something fun for me. And I had no aspirations of just other than, there wasn't a blind U.S. national team at that point in time. It was just, hey, this is an opportunity for me to go out, learn a new skill, meet some new friends, build a new network. And so it was 4 miles down the road. And I had a community of partners and friends that, as they knew that my vision had changed drastically, that they said, what? They all came together and said, what? Let's take turns taking Kevin to practices. So can I maybe ease some of that burden on, my wife and others at the time, and because they wanted to participate. So I had friends that would get up and we could have practices at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning or 11:30 at night, whenever you could get ice. And so they would take me. So that initial first, 4 months of hockey was just excitement. And it just, it kept building on that excitement and building these new relationships. And so that's where hockey came into my life at a perfect time, as, I was dealing with this change and it kind of forced that mindset, don't be afraid to fail, be afraid not to try. And so that's where, it just compelled me to push harder, work harder, that long OCD process of practice became into my hockey world. And then, once again, I had zero aspirations of playing, hockey at the next level. At as the first U.S. blind hockey team was being developed, they had a tryout, and I had zero expectations to be able to participate at that level, because there's no, you have B3s is your the classification levels was your 2200 to 2600 level of vision. Your B2s is 2600 to light perception, and your B1s are typically designated to be goalie. And I said, I don't want to be goalie. I want to play on the ice. And so to be able to play hockey as a B1 skater, that typically doesn't, end well in terms of playing at the highest level or that elite competition, because you're going against folks, once again, who have much better vision than you do. But I got invited to the camp or the tryouts. Apparently I did better than I thought. And then there was a gala later, that week, to name the first team. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've even told the coach this. I was sitting in the hotel with, buddy and his kids, and, they were hanging out and they were, go to the pool and stuff. Like, Kevin, are you going to go to the event tonight? I'm like, I don't think so. I might just sit here and, a buddy, we cracked a can or two and said, like, you sure you want to go? I'm like, maybe I should go. Once, so zero expectations of, they, at that point they were going to name the first team and things of that nature. I am not expecting my name to be called. So as they're doing it in alphabetical order, I don't remember Daniel Belty being called. And then I'm not even paying attention, to be honest with you. I'm like, I'll do my little golf clap. Hey, congratulations. And then they said Kevin Brown. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's another guy with the same name as me here. It didn't really dawn on me because my expectations were not to be literally in that atmosphere. So, was I completely humbled and excited? Yeah. I remember calling my wife and kids up going, you're not going to believe this. So it was really one of those moments in life that I'm like, well, that wasn't peculiar. So, but just so awe-inspired to be considered to be on the team and represent the colors in that capacity was certainly just, tremendously exciting. And then I've relished the opportunity ever since to be part of this community and playing with these young, wonderful men and women who are remarkable players, certainly much better hockey players than I. But they pull up everyone around you. You got a great coaching staff, and once again, the volunteer to help drive the game. It has been phenomenal for me and my family. So it really just creates this joy. So that's been my experience with the blind hockey, program. And I know you had Tim Kane on the show earlier, and, I've met, tremendous people like Tim and who become, best friends of mine. And we shared so much beyond the game. It's the game of life that we engage in. So that's where I feel super excited that this sport has given me, so much.
Sure. Absolutely. And I am curious, any specific moments, goals maybe you've scored, just different things, on the ice that you want to mention?
That first time that we played Canada and you're hearing the national anthem was pretty awe-inspiring. Like I said earlier, I was always interested in the Olympics and then later the Paralympics. And so to be on the ice, listening to your colors, or wearing your colors and listening to that anthem was a pretty powerful moment for me. I'm someone who's been fortunate enough to carry the Olympic torch. So the concept of the Olympics and that national pride runs really strong through my veins. And so to be there on that, starting lineup, that first game was pretty impressive. I have scored a couple of goals. That's also, a rare occurrence and at the B1 level but never in international competition. So I'd say that's kind of fun and neat, but, I'm more on the defensive side. I like getting hit with the puck. That means I've done my job. So every time I get hit, there's a subtle reminder on my body with a different bruise that brings me a level of pride that I've done my job. And so every time I get another nick, that it feels pretty damn good.
Right. Absolutely. And I know you have been involved with the Washington Blind Hockey Club as well, right? Yeah,
I'm fortunate. Craig Fitzpatrick, who disabled vet, started the program, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I think in 2016. And, he built a strong foundation with a bunch of volunteers that helped build the program. create opportunities for folks like myself to get engaged. And, as he stepped down to do other aspects of his own life, I've been fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to be the president of the Washington Blind Hockey Club and create this opportunity for others to come out and try the same sport that has given me so much.
Right. Very cool. And I know just in general, a lot of blind hockey clubs have popped up, just in the last handful of years, and certainly seems like very much a growing sport. And I know there are a lot of goals out there to, actually have, teams competing against each other around the country, and certainly the Paralympic aspirations as well.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get there sooner than later. I think there's 20 teams now in the United States alone. And so, and it's great because there's no other adaptive sport that's that you compete at that pace. And that includes all different vision classifications competing simultaneously together. That's what's really unique with their given vision limitations. So, goalball, everybody's blindfolded. Blind hockey, ironically, the only one who's blindfolded is the goalie. But we all come to the ice with whatever vision we have or don't have, and get to compete. So that's really kind of a unique thing about the blind hockey environment. And so what becomes really important in that sport, just like any sport, is the importance of communication with your teammates and things of that nature. So once again, another cool aspect of sport is how much it helps you in life with communications and teamwork, leadership, things of that nature. So hockey brings that to everybody. And once again, you're working with folks that could be 5 years old to 75 years old that are competing out there, and with that variance of experience, age, ability, vision classification. So it really is a unique sport.
No doubt. I know there's that hashtag and kind of that saying, hockey is for everyone, and it is so true. So moving on to blind soccer. So I know you had mentioned, several years ago, kind of your vision, your idea, to get blind soccer off the ground more officially in this country. And in the last couple of years now, there has been quite an effort by USABA to do so. And so I know last year in 2022, they did actually name the first ever blind soccer team, U.S. national blind soccer team. And so in addition to hockey, you're also on the national blind soccer team. And just talk to me about what that meant to you and kind of how you found out about that opportunity.
Yeah, blind soccer is one of the fastest growing sports in the world for visually impaired. I think it's, competed by close to 70 countries around the world. And it's been a part of the Paralympic Games since 2004. I think Brazil is the only team that's won, every Paralympic gold medal since. But at the time, I first learned about blind soccer. It was probably 2000, 2001, and we were in the United States with USABA. I remember talking to the former executive director and saying, what do you know about blind soccer? Can we bring it to the United States? And once again, there wasn't a whole lot of information on the program. I think it was all in Portuguese at the time. So, but so there not a lot. And it was on like VHS tapes, to give another idea of how old I am. So we, looked into that a little bit, introduced the sport to some of the, players in the Northeast area, just kind of introducing it. It never really grew legs at the time. It was so introductory, conceptually, and soccer wasn't the sport it is today internationally. It sits on the world stage at a much broader level. But you skip ahead, 16 years or so. In 2016, I think it was, USABA became more involved, or maybe 2018 had their first development camp for blind soccer in the United States. And actually I was fortunate enough to participate in that in Maryland. And then subsequently they've had multiple development camps. And then unfortunately there was obviously interruptions with COVID, but they started building out the game to, deaf and blind schools around the country, and trying to make it more of a involved in various communities around the country. And so that's what's started to develop. And so this last year, I was fortunate enough to be one of USABA's blind soccer ambassadors to help champion and cheerlead the availability of the sport, the opportunities that the sport brings, and start building it at the grassroots level. So that's obviously ongoing. There's been, tremendous traction. There's teams and that are developing around the country. There's a group in Texas that's done a phenomenal job. Once again, USABLE is the governing body of blind soccer. So that's going to help facilitate some of that growth as well. They're working once again within the school community to bring that as an opportunity within the curriculum and conversation. And so it really is starting to grow. And with it, one of the things that kind of that top of the pyramid approach is the 2028 Olympics and Paralympics will be held, in LA. And as the host nation, you're guaranteed a spot. So this creates an opportunity for, blind soccer to, get some prominence. But, we got to build that team. And so right now, the team was named in, I think, early November. And so I'm looking forward to being one of those participants that will hopefully, continue to build a foundation and champion the sport so that we can continue to build the strength and hopefully put a nice product out there for everyone in the United States to build upon. And, 2028 obviously is a goal, but we hopefully will be much more successful in the near term through the growth of the sport. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. We have a competition in March, camp, and I think we'll compete internationally for the first time. The United States will be playing Canada, I think March 19th and 20th. So that should be pretty exciting. And so to be part of that journey for a sport that I've been so passionate about for so long is super exciting.
Absolutely. I know when I saw that game actually, listed and on the schedule with Canada, just wow, kind of get chills. Like this is really becoming a thing. It's not just, of course, it's still, in development in general, kind of building the team, building the momentum, but to actually have that match coming up is super exciting to see.
Yeah. And ironically, I leave that, event, come back, and then I think the next 2 days later, I'll be playing Canada in hockey. So it forces me to make sure I stay competitive and keep that fitness level up. So those are great motivators to have for me personally.
Absolutely, no doubt. As far as skiing, I definitely wanted to ask you about skiing. I know you have done some adaptive skiing as well, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate growing up. And once again, we talked about a lot of outside activities. Skiing was one of them. My dad was a very accomplished skier and, ski patrol type concept. And so, I learned how to ski early on. And, as my vision waned, that became a little bit more challenging to do it independently. And then, I'd work with friends where I'd have a collar in the front and, a collar in the back. And so we could ski a little bit. And then as the vision dropped a little bit too far, maybe I didn't want to put my friends in a situation or family members in a situation that, it makes it less comfortable for them. And so I kind of stopped for about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years. And then I went to the Breckenridge outdoor program that, I wanted to ski with my family while they're skiing to also be out in the mountain. And I had the most wonderful guides that just shepherded me down the mountain in such a fun, enjoyable way. And I remember this was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And once again, I had these tears of joy coming down my face. And she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, I just didn't think I'd have the opportunity to do this again with this level of enjoyment, and to come down the bottom of the mountain and have my kids there and just like the normalcy it created. Not to mention that the wind in your hair, if you will, it was just dynamic. I couldn't believe that opportunity, was lost. And, then it was found again. So I strongly encourage folks, if you like skied before or it's a first time opportunity, there are folks just in all those different volunteer and adaptive sports that will create an opportunity for you to really enjoy and participate in life. So it was great. I look forward to doing it again. I've done it a couple times, and, unfortunately we didn't get a lot of snow in the DC area this year. But I do look to participate more in the future with the adaptive skiing programs around the country.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is definitely on my bucket list as well. Being a lifelong Floridian, obviously it's always pretty much warm here year round. So I've only seen snow one time really in my life. But would love to get some ski experience and get out there on the slopes or cross country or whatever it may be.
Well, I mean, you got adaptive water skiing. I know they've got that as well. I think you got one of your guests that did that as well. So,
true. Yeah. I did have the chance to do that, which was super fun. So, definitely different than snow skiing, but hey, it's another cool opportunity for sure. So I know you do have two sons you've mentioned, and I'm definitely curious about just the opportunities to coach them and kind of what that has meant to you, and then also just kind of how they've viewed you, as a dad with a disability, who is visually impaired. Just talk to me about that relationship, and then specifically the coaching kind of sports angle as well.
Yeah. So I'm blessed with two boys, Jack and Henry. Jack's 19 and Henry is 16. And for them, having a blind dad or visually impaired dad, that's all they know. That's just their normalcy. Their only dad is a blind and visually impaired dad. So that's what they grew up with. And so for them, that's not, that's like I said, that's their norm. And so for me, as a longtime athlete, highly competitive, I love participating. Nothing I thought would be more enjoyable than competing on the field, the pitch, the ice, the track. But I was wrong. It's actually coaching and sharing my passion for the game and sharing that knowledge and experience. Both these successes and failures have been what I've actually, once again, as I talked about the Special Olympic experience, is I gained more personally through coaching than I ever did playing. And once again, I was pretty successful and had opportunities to compete at the highest level in a couple of different sports. And none of that compares to sharing your passion, sharing your enjoyment, helping others reach their goals and then go beyond, help building that trust and that partnership, creating that, the recognition that sport is, transcends life. It's, that once again, that teamwork, the communication, the leadership, shared experiences, and those community-based aspects are what drives me. And so having, two boys who are very athletic, and more importantly, excited about academics as well, that being able to share those activities with them and their peers, that has been phenomenal. Coaching kids playing, I've coached and I've got my licenses for coaching soccer and track and field, and then now hockey. And I also coached, basketball and football. So those experiences for me, like I can't wait to do it. That's the part that gives me the most rush, is seeing that light bulb go on or watching somebody, exceed their own expectations. And so from a coaching perspective, for me, obviously you got a visually impaired or blind coach. Like, how does that work? And so it starts with that communication, that partnership, letting them know that I'm there for them and that, we'll do this together. If I can do this, just imagine what you can do. And so building that belief system and encouraging them, don't worry about failing. If you don't try, you've already lost. And so building that belief that, we're going to go out there and do the best. But then everything we did was always predicated on communication, because I didn't get to see what was going on in the field unless they talked. So I would teach them the importance of communication in sport. Once again, most people think it's what you do with the ball or the puck or, what have you. It's what you're doing when you don't have it. It's how do you, when you're participating, you're helping shape the game by what you do off the ball. And so building the fact that you have to work kind of in the symphony, working together, building that teamwork and that trust and that communication is what has been so effective for me as a coach because everyone's involved, even when they don't have the ball or the puck or what have you. And so building that kind of like mindset, I'm a pretty tough coach in terms of what my expectations are. Like if you're coming here to practice, my expectation is that you're here to practice to grow in the sport and things of that nature. We'll have plenty of time to do those other, goofing off things. But when you're on our field, this is what we're trying to do as a unit together. And once again, building that trust, creating that environment for success. So if you weren't talking on the field, you had an opportunity to sit next to me and tell me what was going on. So people would much rather play than sit and tell me what was going on. So I got folks that would communicate. So I could literally visually see the entire game happening before my eyes through my ears. And the kids in the community became, that they were like, oh, I'm lucky. I got the line coach. So I remember hearing that. And one of the, after the teams were named in those community sport activities, and it was just really funny. And I just, chuckled to myself. I'm like, you know what? He's right. They are pretty lucky. And so our teams were generally pretty successful, putting it mildly. And, my kids became pretty accomplished in the sports that they were interested in participating in. And, the most important thing for me as a parent is, despite the success my kids have had, I've always let it be on their terms. So I'm not saying, hey, you have to play soccer, or you have to throw javelin, or you have to do this. It's whatever you want to do. I'm going to participate in your life in that way. And it's been nice that some of those sports have intersected, and some they've gone on their own paths. But what they brought with them is that shared passion and the interest and enjoyment. And so it's pretty exciting to see them go off and find their own paths, but still have that same mindset of how they were going to compete, and then building that trust and building that community, and having a lot of fun doing it at the same time. So it's all got to be predicated on fun.
No doubt. Very well said, and very powerful stuff. And, once again, it shows not only can someone with a disability participate in sports, but, you can actually be out there coaching and being involved in so many different ways. I mean, there's so many things, so many opportunities, and like you said, just kind of using other senses, using other ways of interpreting things, what's going on. I mean, it's, anything's doable.
Oh yeah. I mean, I look back and I'm going to brag about my kids here. Jack and Henry were both very accomplished javelin throwers. They were top 10 in the country, junior Olympics, things of that nature. And, obviously I was their coach, and the way I would coach is I would let them know things like, as it's coming off the javelin's coming, I would hear it like, all right, you're pulling too much, or you're not pulling enough. It's flicking too much off your fingers. You're not using the right grip. And so I could hear it, or I could hear it wobble a certain way. I'm like, oh, that pulled to the right. It's like, how do you know that? Well, once again, that OCD activity of me just like practicing, what does this mean? What is that? What's that sound? Does it correlate? And building that environment so that I could coach through a totally different process than others, and getting people to understand kind of that dynamic. And so we'd get more out of the athletes. We had so many kids that were highly successful because they built that trust. Right.
And I'm sure there were cases, or have been cases, where kids might say, how did you know that? Or how could you tell?
Oh, correct. Yeah.
But it's
eventually they stopped caring because they just knew the result was going to be pretty positive. So that was one of the interesting things, is they just like, you also couldn't screw off or in the background, because I would hear you. And so people became pretty attentive, because they if people were screwing off, it would be, how long can you do a plank? And I could do a pretty long time. So folks really wanted to get back to practice. So we stayed pretty focused.
Right. No doubt.
But once again, I was blessed with a great community of folks who, families that trusted me to share my passion and help, once again, prove to them that there's so many things that are important in life, regardless of the challenges or things that we face. We all have things that we have to deal with, but we all get there through working together and through a teamwork, through the communication. So that's kind of that mindset that, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of in my community and as well as share that, belief.
Sure. So to put a bow on this episode, just wanted to give you the chance to mention any final words, any final advice. Someone listened to this who maybe has not ever competed in sports or is not very active. What kind of advice would you tell that person about the benefits of getting up and getting moving?
Well, I would start with it. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid not to try. So get out there and engage in that process. And, I'm sure like those folks just like me, it all comes back to I have a tremendous support structure. My wife and kids and my parents and siblings have all been a strong supporter of me being out there and being active. So I'm sure there's folks in your community and in your relationships that, they want to see you out there participating in life. So get up, do life, be engaged, be a part of it. Sometimes you may feel a little bit nervous, but I hope, like I did, there's going to be a lot of tears of joy in your future. So get out and be a part of life.
Right. Very, very impactful words. Really appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time. It's really been a joy just getting to chat with you here the last few days, getting to know you and having the time to talk on this podcast. I'm just so impressed at all your achievements, both on the field, off the field. So it's been an honor to have you on here on Eyes Free Sports.
I appreciate it.
Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter @eyesfreesports.